Brandon and Alex, hello, and thank you so much for joining the show today. Really excited for our conversation.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah,
Thanks
likewise.
for having us.
Yeah, definitely. We
Absolutely.
appreciate the invite.
Yes, of course. Well, we have so much to talk about today. And, we just have a very exciting conversation ahead. So, to kick things off, why don't we start by talking about your guys' early career journey? Those first opportunities that you had. How did you land your first opportunity, whether it was a job or internship in aerospace? And if you could speak a little bit to your guys' experiences there.
Sure. Alex, do you want to go first? I'll go first.
Sure. Yeah, we could go back and forth all day. Yeah, so I started at UCLA Aerospace Engineering, got my master's there. My first internship in aerospace was actually at ATK in Canoga Park. I forget the year exactly, maybe 2006. Um, but um, Yeah, I would say my first like that it was a great learning opportunity. Really first introduction to like flight tests and a lot of the systems engineering stuff that I've used throughout my career.
Yeah, for me, surprisingly enough, during my undergrad, UCLA Aerospace also, I actually enjoyed my summers. I really didn't focus on, getting internships. Classes were rough enough throughout the year as it is. The last thing I wanted to do was like overload myself with like more things during the summer, and it was kind of like my decompression time. So I actually did an intern during my time in undergrad, and it wasn't only until I graduated and then joined the workforce that I joined doing my first engineering role, which was in spacecraft systems. So I actually worked for a company called General Dynamics that had a contract with the U.S. Navy, and they have a satellite operations center in Point Mugu Navy Base up in Oxnard, California. So my first job was literally, doing command and control on Navy satellites, doing anomaly resolution and all types of subsystem, trends and whatnot. So, it was a good way to take all that engineering skill set that you learn in school and then apply it to the real world.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. And I'm so glad that you both have very different experiences entering the industry just because it goes to show students, I mean, you guys are both UCLA alum, that there's more than one way to do it, more than one way to enter the industry to get started. And there's not one linear path to success here. So thank you so much for sharing that, just providing a bit of insight into your introduction to the workforce there. And as you mentioned, you guys are both UCLA alum. Could you talk a little bit about how your time at UCLA prepared you for your career in aerospace?
Yeah, so from my standpoint, I mean, I always knew I wanted to go to UCLA. It was kind of like, you grew up in Southern California. I grew up in the Valley, like right over the hill. And UCLA was just the it school for me. And growing up during the time when like space shuttle was all the rage, and uh, you know, Top Gun was the main movie growing up, and the '80s Iron Eagle, things like that. Um, for me, like airplanes were always a big thing, so I always knew that I wanted to do aerospace engineering, something related to aviation space. And a lot of people, what they don't realize is that Los Angeles is the aerospace capital of the world. It has been for the last century, and it's not going to change anytime soon. So there's always been a big footprint of aerospace and defense here. Growing up, I had friends whose parents worked in the industry as well, and it was just one of those things that I kind of naturally gravitated towards just because of my own personal likings and whatnot. So going to UCLA for me was great. The professors there were amazing, always pushing you and challenging you. Doing your core classes at the beginning, that's always kind of like the slog that you have to like go through. You kind of have to get through like the pain of getting through those classes, which are meant to be weeder classes, right? Like a lot of people that started with me realized that they didn't want to be engineers by the time they were done, like their second year of like core classes. But once you got into like the specialized courses, upper division, undergraduate level courses, and you really start putting, theory into design or, labs, writing up papers, things of that nature. That's where, I really enjoyed, doing aircraft design or spacecraft design or, you know, writing up research papers based on like laboratory experiments and, things like that. So for me, that was probably like one of the best things that I remember from undergrad. Um, Alex probably has something different.
Actually, no, my experience was exactly the same. I have nothing to add. No,
Yeah.
I'm kidding. So I grew up in the Valley also. I remember, driving past the Rocketdyne plant, the Boeing Rocketdyne plant with the space shuttle main engine in Canoga Park, and that was always like so cool to me. So yeah, being able to go to UCLA for aerospace engineering was great. I had a good experience as well. I think academically, UCLA skews a little bit more theoretical than practical, but there's also like a huge club scene. So engineering club scene, that is. Not as exciting as it may sound. But that's really like I found that as a really great way to like kind of supplement my theoretical education with, practical applications. So AIAA, design, build, fly. There's a few SAE clubs. We restarted the UCLA Rocketry Club while I was there. And so, the faculty and staff were hugely supportive of those kind of extracurriculars. And honestly, I thought that like having that theoretical background, a little bit more math, a little bit more difficult, but then being able to parlay that into something that you can, build yourself, put together yourself, go fly, go see it, in the course of a quarter, couple of quarters, was incredibly rewarding. So, um, I would say that like, that's a little bit more unique, in that it focuses a little bit more on the theory, and then it's up to you to go find your practical application. But you can kind of choose your own path in that regard. So I thought that was valuable.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing your both of your guys' experience there, because you're absolutely right. It's so important, especially, for all the Bruins out there listening to our conversation today, to stay really engaged in the coursework. That's one of the best ways you can, while you mentioned the curriculum at UCLA specifically for aerospace may have been theoretical, staying engaged and challenging yourself through different types of classes, different coursework really allowed you to then kind of take that knowledge and apply it elsewhere in a more practical way. Getting engaged in clubs as well was a great way to broaden your experience and really demonstrate your interest in the industry as well. So that's definitely one of the many benefits of going to UCLA is there is a large opportunity to get involved with student clubs and organizations on campus that just offer many networking opportunities and skill development opportunities that are really hands-on and practical, particularly in the space industry as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. Yeah. And talking a little bit more about the early days in your guys' career experience, I would love to maybe talk a little bit about mentorship and guidance that you guys had early on. Did you have any mentors or early career influences that really helped shape your path in aerospace? And could you share a little bit about the lessons that you learned early on through those relationships?
Alex, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I would say that I had a few mentors growing up in the area. Like Brandon said, there are aerospace professionals out there, plenty in LA. So yeah, just kind of being able to interface with them. I did have a close family friend that was a senior engineer at Boeing. I was able to talk to them. They were more on the space side than the air side, and I was definitely more into airplanes as I guess, a stepping stone to space, maybe in the future. But yeah, they were able to provide a lot of guidance. They were able to help me kind of network in the region. Um, I'm not gonna lie, I probably got that first internship at ATK because they, made a phone call for me. But yeah, being able to kind of understand, these are the steps that you have to take. It's very kind of formulaic to get to that point. But then once you're there and you've proven that you can kind of do the work and then you've got the academic chops, like the world really opens up. And so yeah, I guess, kind of instilling in that, like, don't say no, just kind of do the hard work and then see where it goes kind of mentality was very useful from an engineering mentor at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would second that. I guess like for me, like one of my earliest mentors in that space was actually one of my high school math tutors. Just happened to be like my grandparents' neighbor who was like a Boeing, rocket scientist. And like I remember like, taking calculus classes and like, there were certain things that I was like struggling to understand. And so like, this next door neighbor said like, "Oh, I'll tutor you, no problem." And just being able to have that early mentorship with him and learn more about his job and what he was doing, and he was able to like, make certain concepts easily understandable and whatnot. So that kind of inspired me more to, kind of like just keep going and kind of assured me that I was on the right path, I guess you could say. And then as far as like once, I was at UCLA, there were some professors here and there that like definitely like stood out in my mind as folks that you kind of want to aspire to be or be like, I guess you could say. So my flight controls professor was really cool. Originally from the UK, but was a Boeing engineer, actually a test engineer. So like he would fly like the jump seat on like test stuff for like Boeing and whatnot. And he always made the class really fun, really engaging. Was kind of had that like, British sarcastic wit to him too. So, the test was kind of like fun in that regard. It wasn't like dry, mundane lecturing all the time. And then moving into the workforce, I can't say like there were any specific like folks that mentored me per se until I really got deeper into my career path. So it wasn't until I actually moved out of engineering and then into more of a business development when I was at Northrop Grumman that I actually started getting hands-on mentoring from different executive level people, vice presidents, directors, things of that nature. But I think it also had to do a lot with the role that I was in, where I was being moved around like every 2 to 3 years to like kind of like groom you for like more, bigger and better things, I guess you could say.
Mm.
And that's when, having those mentors really paid off because they each came with their own different, you know, set of skills and ways of like making you think about, what's next, what's bigger and better, giving you the chance to, do certain roles or even identifying roles that you thought that, you know, you weren't suited for, and then them kind of saying, what, like, I think you should try it. I think, this would be good for you for your development. So in that regard, kind of like, taking you out of your comfort zone and, putting you through the paces and kind of doing like that trial by fire development. So that definitely helped.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, and
absolutely.
I guess sorry if I could
Yeah,
if I could add
absolutely.
something, because this is something I was really bad at early on in my career. You know, these stories kind of make it sound like mentorship happens by accident, but it doesn't have to. And so, to someone, students getting just started, I would say like find that person that kind of has that role that you want to see for yourself maybe 10 years from now, maybe the 10 to 20 year point, not too senior, but not too junior either, and reach out. Most people want to help. They really do. Especially in tech, in business, in engineering, especially like it's so important to find that person, kind of just start even cold calling or find them on LinkedIn and just ask a few questions like, hey, how did you get here? What went into it? I'm very interested in what you're doing and I'd like to be there in the future. Because you may not find the right person to mentor you, in the right moment, but if you kind of start that search and build that portfolio of potential mentors, that can be really useful down the line. So, I think Brandon and I, they both kind of happened a little bit by accident, but um, yeah, you can be a little bit more active, and I think that'll pay dividends.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And thank you. It's so interesting that looking back and reflecting on your own mentorship relationships over the years, how it's changed and how both of you were able to find mentorships in different areas of your life to that which eventually helped you professionally in the aerospace industry. So thank you so much for sharing that really diverse range of experience there for both of you. And on that point about, finding mentorship, it's not something accidental. It's something that you go out and you it's a relationship that you go out and find and build for yourself as a young professional. For all those UCLA students listening to our conversation today, could you share maybe one piece of advice you have as far as networking and maybe what that looks like, how they could successfully network to build these mentorship relationships that you've identified are really important in advancing and developing your own careers, maybe even something that you've learned more recently as you continue to network for your own career paths today?
I mean, I guess for me, networking was never a problem. I consider myself to be like the extroverted engineer, which is a rarity, or at least it was during, back in the day with in my particular class. Um, I always knew that I wouldn't be an engineer like sitting in a cubicle for like 20 years of my life. Um, I I already had identified that I wanted to do something else, something more customer forward facing, more engaging, working with people, talking with people. So I guess it really depends on your comfort zone. Some people have a really hard time networking, but it's kind of pushing yourself to do it, right? Whether it's through career fairs or whether it's through, networking events. I mean, here in Southern California for the aerospace and defense industry, there are a ton of like networking mixers that occur. And like, I mean, Rose, you saw it during
Yeah.
SoCal Deep Tech Week,
Yeah.
right? There's just so many things that happen throughout the year. For any student who's looking to, make further connections within the industry, and get to know people here in Southern California. It's just a matter of keeping your ear to the ground and connecting with people on LinkedIn and
Mm-hmm.
signing up for these events and attending these events because a lot of them are free. There are some here and there that are by invite only, or you have to pay like a small fee to get in. But for the most part, most of the stuff that happens throughout the year is like you just sign up and show up.
Yeah, that's right. And to lean into that a little further and demystify maybe that for students as far as finding these events, are there any uh, resources that you found in particular, whether that's a newsletter, whether that's a specific group here in LA? How could students stay up to date on those events who are looking to really take that next step and get into the industry and start meeting professionals?
One company that's really good about, blasting all that information out is a company called Payload.
Mm.
So if you like sign up for their newsletter, uh, you get like weekly updates on things happening in the industry. Um, Mixers, they host a lot of mixers. Trying to think of other things.
Luma has a good like local events blast, specifically for aerospace professionals. AIAA, I think, does like every other week or once a month at Common Space. There's like a young professionals mixer. Um, yeah, I mean, to kind of echo what Brandon said, just go where the things are happening. Go to these events. Everyone's going to be just as awkward as you are, but everybody's there to network. Like we know what it's about. It's not a surprise. So, kind of puts everybody on common ground, I think, which is important if you're not, an adept networker like Brandon is.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. I mean, go where it's happening. And as we all know on this call, it's definitely happening in LA. LA is the best place to be for this industry. So yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing those specific resources. Palo Luma, for those of you listening, I hope you're taking notes because this is gold. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And to get to the next point in the conversation, I would love to talk about key skills that you have found, or key skills and knowledge that you have found crucial or found really important when transitioning from university to your first professional role. What does that look like? I think something you mentioned earlier in the conversation, both of you actually, was that university knowledge and coursework tended to be more theoretical. So how did you kind of bridge the gap and prepare for your first professional role in industry?
I would say kind of know the industry too. Like, first step would be if you're like, I want to go into aerospace, I know we keep talking about aerospace. This is not necessarily an aerospace focused podcast, but that's our experience. Kind of understand the trends, read the news articles. Again, AIAA is a great resource for that, but industry publications, just kind of understand the jobs that are out there that and the fields within that industry that you might want to find yourself involved with. I think that it'll help you kind of target your search a little bit better, but then you can speak intelligently in interviews as to the state of the industry, kind of understand, that 10 to 20 year, timeline, like where things are today and where they want to grow into. And I think that gives you a lot of credibility with your first job. Beyond that, I would say the first couple of years are going to suck. Just suck it up, do the work, prove your grit. It's kind of the same as at school. It's something to get through, but then at that point, like, don't say no to opportunities, use your network. Somebody's always doing something interesting, and then you can really grow from there and find where you really want to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think Alex hit everything that I wanted to say. Um,
Sorry.
but yeah, I mean, like if someone would have told me, 20 years ago, like this is where you're going to end up, like, you know, today, I would have been like, how did I end up there? Like that wasn't my original, career plan.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, certain things were serendipitous, like that happened throughout my career, but they all led me to the point I'm at now. And I guess it was just, not saying no to the opportunity and like, jumping, with both feet in and just taking on the challenge and using what you learn to like then move on to the next opportunity. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And Alex, I know you mentioned this is not exclusively an aerospace podcast. You're right, but a lot of the key points you both just made are really important and can be translated across any industry. I mean, getting to know your industry, doing your research, right? Staying up to date on the trends and the direction of the industry over the next 5 to 10 years. That is so important for anyone looking to find a position or find a specific company and be able to talk knowledgeable and have a informed conversation in any kind of interview going into a role. And also saying yes to new opportunities. Brandon, you mentioned you didn't always know that this was where you wanted to end up, but saying yes to new opportunities just opened many paths for you. Understanding that is also very important as students. We're so early on in our career that understanding that, hey, just say yes to upcoming opportunities and really set yourself up to be adaptable, be flexible. And yeah, that's just I think that's the crux of the point, your point there. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's so important for students to really hear that, especially from professionals who've already established their career and understand what it's like to be specifically a UCLA student at this point in time, and now to look back and offer those insights. So thank you. Yeah. And to move on, so speaking of doing your research and understanding the industry trends and where the future of the industry is going, I would love to speak to both of you and ask what are some exciting trends that or challenges that you're seeing currently in the industry here in SoCal or just generally in aerospace and defense? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, I guess I'm on the spot now because I brought it up, huh? Yeah, so I think um, I can speak from an aerospace and defense perspective. One of the opportunities is that, you know, there's definitely an intersection of dual use technology, both for commercial and government use cases. That's really, getting a lot of emphasis and a lot of attention right now. Government acquisitions is accelerating. They are interested in a lot of new procurement programs and really like bringing tech more into the fold. It used to be really just two separate worlds where you develop for commercial or you develop for commercial, government, sorry. Um, and those are intertwining a lot more. They're trying to accelerate those acquisition processes, those innovation routes, procurement, research and development dollars, and really trying to make, almost like one thread of commercial and government. So I would say that that's a real opportunity for a lot of tech. If you haven't looked at government, I'm sure there's a lot of money out there that you would qualify for, and a lot of interest that your technology would garner for long-term procurement programs.
Yeah, I'd say one other trend that I've noticed recently is medicine in space and in orbit manufacturing, things of that nature. There's a huge push. A lot of bioengineering companies are now starting to do research in space. So you're seeing space medicine be an up and coming, I guess you could say, trend in the industry per se. Companies like Varda Space and Made in Space, which was acquired. So it's no longer Made in Space, but all those companies started out doing some type of in space assembly or manufacturing. Other trends you're going to see are capturing an asteroid, mining an asteroid, bringing critical materials back down to Earth. Rare earth metals that are hard to find here are very expensive to mine. Um, and there's limited amounts, and some are owned by, not like many countries. You know, Going into space for that stuff is going to open up a lot of possibilities for future development and, future, I guess you could say, innovation related to things within the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. As seasoned professionals in the industry, it's really great to hear, where you see the industry heading and key trends and challenges you anticipate in the future. So thank you so much for that. I would love to now talk about your inspiration in starting your own defense tech company. I mean, you guys are both co-founders and you guys have both have had these very established careers in aerospace, in defense. And so now to get to this point, could you talk about what was your was there maybe a defining moment that really inspired you to, after a long career of as an aerospace professional, to now then shift and decide to move to the startup side and become co-founders? Was there a specific defining moment that really inspired this entrepreneurial journey for both of you?
You like to
I'll
go?
take it. Yeah. So I guess for me, it's like it's like a little bit of manifest destiny. I feel like in my career I've checked like a lot of boxes, right? Like I was an engineer, check. I worked at a prime, check. I did business development, strategy and innovation roles, things of that nature. Um, I worked on the accelerator side, VC side for a bit. Running early stage startup accelerators for the U.S. government, for allied governments. And I feel like, the next logical step in my mind was always going to be being an operator and being part of a early stage startup. I never thought per se I'd be a co-founder, but like, it's just like one of those things that just like kind of literally fell on my lap. And in part just because of my relationship with Alex and Alex from earlier in our careers. Um, that's kind of how this opportunity, happened. And that's why I'm here now. And Alex can probably like, delve a little bit more into how he landed on the role and ended up in, the same startup together. So.
Yeah, so I would say overall, like, not that like you create your own luck, but you need to be in position to take advantage of good luck, right? So, I started in the Air Force, so I wanted to go to flight test. I wanted to work with startups. I worked with a number of startups, and then just, kind of got ended up in the right place at the right time. But, having had that background and being, I don't know, maybe successful up to here. Really kind of put me in a position that I could take advantage of the opportunity when it presented itself. So I would say like, from a mentorship standpoint, yeah, like be open to the opportunity, be open to a little bit of risk, but also kind of set yourself up be in position to take advantage of that opportunity, because you never really know it'll present itself.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of luck, a little bit of fortune, and a little bit of, just preparation.
Yeah, a little luck and a little preparation. That's great. Thank you. I mean, that's great to hear that. I mean, that's really important for students to hear, to understand that you create these opportunities for yourself. And even if it's early on in your career in ways that maybe you don't see yet, it could eventually culminate for yourself into a entrepreneurial journey, to that kind of a launch point, as you guys both found yourselves at. So that's great. And to speak a little bit more about that, could you share a bit about maybe how you two met originally? I mean, I know, Alex, you said this has been about kind of putting yourself in an opportunity just over the time of your career to now be at this point where you feel ready to launch your own startup. And Brandon, you mentioned, hey, like this came because you feel that this opportunity landed in your lap because of your relationship with Alex. So could you maybe talk a little bit about that? How did you two originally meet? I mean, you guys are both UCLA alums, so this is just, I think it's just like the perfect combination here.
So it started there, but
Mhm.
started with UCLA.
Yeah.
Both of us being Bruins, both of us being from the aerospace program.
Mhm.
But I think it really it really developed during my time when I was working for Starburst Aerospace. So Starburst at the time was, the first aerospace and defense accelerator that came online globally, and we had an LA office here. And at the time, I was working as head of BD for Starburst and doing some stuff with the DoD, primarily with the branch called AFWorks, also known as Air Force Ventures. Um, and I think that's like one of the earliest conversations where Alex and I like actually, got to know each other. And I think he was still in the Air Force or on his way out, I think around that time. And he was, like you mentioned, he was working with other startups and helping with their test flight programs and whatnot. And so like it was kind of like, he knew what I was up to and like what I was doing. And then I feel like every few years or so we would just like touch base with one another and like, what was going on in the industry. And the latest touch point was him basically saying, "Hey, I joined the startup and they're looking for, a commercial officer that has your background and, are you interested?" So
Wow.
uh yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I had just finished test pilot school, but I noticed that there was, while there's still a lot of exciting, military flight tests happening, really the civilian aviation sector was, really starting to take off. A lot of interesting projects between autonomy and urban air mobility and high-speed flight. So, being up at Edwards, Starburst, was one of the closest geographically, and also industry-wise, technology touch points. So yeah, I reached out to Brandon. I knew that he was active there. We had both gone to UCLA, and we just started talking. And so that was actually a huge opportunity for me because, through Starburst I was able to meet a few companies that I ended up consulting for. And then again, Brandon and I stayed in touch, and it's just kind of right place at the right time.
That's incredible. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that story. I think that shares a couple great lessons for current Bruins, current students out there. While your guys' relationship didn't really become official until you guys started crossing paths, as you mentioned, at different points throughout your career journeys. But I think this serves as a great lesson for current students right now. I mean, today, those at UCLA just taking classes, think you might want to do something one day, look around, because potentially your peers are going to become your next co-founders in the future, maybe even a couple years down the line. You just never know. So having that in the back of your mind is really important when it comes to either sharing opportunities, reaching out for opportunities, or potentially building relationships that continue to grow and continue to maybe even turn into a co-founder relationship. So that's great. Thank you so much for sharing your guys' backstory there. I think that's really inspiring. Yeah. Yeah. And another thing I would like to ask about your guys' journey as co-founders together, could you speak to some challenges that you have faced so far in your journey building your startup? I think it's really important for students to get an idea about, what challenges or obstacles may lie ahead in the journey, and more importantly, how you can overcome them, what to expect, and potentially, what next steps to take. How can you overcome the challenges of being an entrepreneur?
Um,
Uh,
I guess from my standpoint, early on in our startup life, primarily because myself and the CEO were responsible for raising money, our first venture round. Um, the challenges of raising venture capital in a very tough environment, and just having to pitch over 100 times, and most of those are no's, but eventually leading to the few yeses that turned into our lead investors and follow-on folks, um, and just being resilient in that sense. We were able to do it in a short amount of time during the summertime when most venture capital vacations. So I think it was a little mix of good luck and talking to the right folks and targeted and targeting who we're going to be talking to, but also just having the right team in place. Now, as we move into the next phase of the startup, there are going to be operational challenges as we start to ramp up, bringing people on board, first facility, starting to build what we're building. So yeah.
yeah, so I would say more from a product and strategy standpoint, just starting off, like we have a concept and we have an idea for what the market is, we have an idea for what the customers want. But that's not, none of that is really solidified. So kind of I think being open to the change, being open to feedback, putting something in front of a customer as quickly as possible, is really valuable because you need to kind of bound your trade space. And not every customer is going to want the same thing, given your product. But it's better to have one that really likes what you have than a couple that are kind of wishy-washy. So, I would say, yeah, like Brandon said, there's a lot of trial and error, there's a lot of experimentation, um, but just putting your concept out there, and generating that feedback as early as possible is super important to help you kind of guide your engineering, your product development process.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And one point I really liked was, Brandon, you were talking about this, the power of resiliency. I mean, you are going to face a lot of situations where, whether it's raising capital or talking to just different stakeholders and decision makers that can potentially impact your company, you're going to hear a lot of no's, and you're going to pitch over and over and over again. But it only takes one yes to keep going. And so that's just what the reality is, and that is the power of resiliency, being able to endure all the no's and face rejection and accept rejection and work through rejection to keep going, keep growing as a company. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's really, really so important. And I would really like students to take away just that is the reality, but there are ways, if you stick it through. I mean, that just comes down to really knowing your why and your mission, and really staying true to that to be able to overcome that challenge, and eventually, find that one yes, find those two yeses, and that's all it takes to keep going. So yeah, absolutely. And Alex talking about the trial and error aspect as well. I mean, that's also very, very important. The importance of getting that feedback. I think students, especially from the student perspective, from our audience today, I mean, we have an idea about research, right? Trial and error, putting an idea out there, testing it, getting feedback, and then from there reiterating and finding ways to improve, adapt, and stay resilient, stay quick on our feet. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for sharing that. With the audience in mind, I mean, a lot of the folks listening to our conversation today, a lot of them are Bruins or students from other schools, just young professionals today. So thinking about the next generation, what advice would you give to college students and young professionals who are really inspired by your story today and are passionate about joining, or launching a startup in the aerospace and defense industry? What advice do you have for them?
Let's do it. uh, start early, and be focused on the tech, but have an idea where you're going with it, right? I've seen it kind of both sides where there's, a lot of hype and not a lot of tech behind the hype, or a lot of tech and then no real business development. And so there's definitely a middle ground somewhere in there, a happy medium. So, I would say develop the idea, socialize it a little bit. You don't have to quit your job quite yet. But I would say take the risk. And worst case, like I've never met more people doing interesting things than since I helped start this company. And it's been less than a year. So even in almost going on 20-year career, the last year has been the most exciting. So even if you fail, you know that you'll meet a lot of people, you'll get a lot of interesting and inspiring ideas from the networking and the startup culture. So I think it's really valuable.
Yeah, I'll second that. Also, don't be afraid to ask, people for help or people for mentorship, or like there every now and then I get pinged by UCLA students like saying, "Hey, I love the career path that you took. Like, can you talk to me for 30 minutes about like, how you did that, or can you advise me on what I should do or what?" I always try my best to respond and basically offer that type of mentorship, because it's kind of like a paying it forward. People did that for me, so I feel like I should do that for the next generation that's up and coming. But yeah, like just don't be afraid to do it. Do your homework. That's super impossible. Or super. Just it's a very important part of the whole scheme of coming up with an idea. It's not impossible if you do your homework. It makes it a whole lot harder if you don't. A lot of people have, great ideas. Ideas are a dime a dozen, right? So you really have to identify a problem, and why your problem is going to, or why your solution is going to solve that problem, and how is it going to do it better than everybody, right? So those are just things to consider and to keep in mind as you think about if you want to go into the startup business, specifically for this industry. Um, uh, Things to consider, and then also another thing to consider is, and I tell this a lot to people, aerospace and defense industry, even though it is super large and it brings in more money than Hollywood does for the Southern California region, and nationally for that matter, um, it's very small as far as the people that are in it. So you start to see a lot of the same people over your career, whether they stay at the same company or move to other companies, or they're military and then they join the private sector. Um, Coming from this industry gives you a lot of street credit. So working for a prime, or working for a SpaceX or a Palantir or an Anduril, in the future, uh, that's going to help, because it's going to show that you already put your teeth within the industry and you understand the way the industry works. People that don't come from the industry and try to break into it usually face a tough uphill battle, just because people don't know if they should trust you or believe in what you're selling. So that's one huge thing that I've seen over and over again.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. And there are so many valuable points there. Thank you so much for that advice. Just speaking directly to our audience today. So many great points there. So to make sure I'm doing my job and the audience really takes away the value in what you both just said there, there is so much value in taking that leap, taking the risk, and just getting started, launching your career in the industry here, taking the risk, betting on yourself, and potentially later down the line launching a startup in the industry. So yes, absolutely, the risk is it's there, and if you want to reach out and just take that leap of faith, it is so worth it. As both of you, I'm sure, can attest to, like, this is a fast-paced industry, this is an intense industry, but there is a real opportunity here to make a big impact, not just not just on your immediate community, but you are solving real problems here. So this is a worldwide kind of scale and scope for impact here. So that's really exciting, and one of the payoffs of taking that risk and taking that leap in your journey. And also, don't be afraid to ask for help. Wow, that was really, really great to hear. Just because I think as students, and as young professionals early on in our career, there might be some intimidation there, right? There might be some maybe hesitation as well to reach out to established professionals. But as you just heard from Alex and Brandon here, I mean, you might be surprised how many people are willing to help, especially, reach out to alumni as well. I mean, Brandon's saying here, UCLA alumni really want to pay it forward, mentor students, and even just if you're a student or a young professional, reach out, find people who you may align with, either through educational background or just similar interests. There's always going to be someone that you can connect to and potentially reach out to for help, build a relationship with, and that could lead to mentorship down the line, and just help in ways that you don't necessarily anticipate now. I love what you guys said earlier about the journey ahead. It's going to be challenging. That's it. I mean, when you're solving tough problems like this, when you're doing something that's potentially no one else has done before, this is going to be a challenging journey ahead, but it's not impossible. You have to do your research, do your homework, put in the work, and then from there you might look up one day and be surprised. Wow, like, how did I get here? How did I get to this point? Look at all the work I've done. Look at all the lives I've impacted. So and that is what it's all about. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing those valuable words of wisdom and advice to our listeners today. And yeah, I think that wraps up our conversation today. So thank you both so much for all of the valuable insights and just providing a really great window into your experience as aerospace professionals and now as rising co-founders. I'm so excited to see what you guys do next. And I wish you the best of luck building and growing your startup. Can't wait to see it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. This is exciting.
Yep.
I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Absolutely. And before we hop off the call, where can students go to learn more about maybe the work that you're doing now and potentially reach out?
I mean, LinkedIn is a great way to start.
Yeah.
As far as finding out about what we're doing, it's gonna have to wait and see. That's part of
All right.
the whole stealth mode.
Yeah.
Our what we're developing is a real game changer for the specific niche that we're targeting, and people are just gonna have to wait and see.
All right. Well, then
Yeah,
that just means
LinkedIn.
we're just gonna have to stay tuned and reach out on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect with Alex and Brandon. More information will be provided in the show notes. But thank you so much to both of you, Alex and Brandon, being really generous with your time here and sharing so many valuable insights. I wish you both the best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.